Charles Whitman thought it would be the perfect moment, his lavish wedding, his elite guest list, and the woman he once discarded watching from the shadows. But Naomi Brooks didn't come to beg. She walked in wearing red, flanked by three little girls with his face. The music stopped, his bride froze, and the cameras turned. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The truth walked in beside her, and the millionaire who tried to erase them was about to lose everything. The opulent ballroom of the Grand Hyatt shimmered under the crystal chandeliers, a testament to Charles Whitman's boundless wealth. Every surface gleamed, every floral arrangement bespoke extravagance, and the air buzzed with the excited chatter of New York City's elite. Charles, impeccably dressed in a bespoke tuxedo, stood beside his radiant fiancée, Eleanor Vance, a woman of impeccable social standing and undeniable beauty. Their smiles were plastered on, a flawless facade of a perfect union. Yet, beneath Charles's placid exterior, a current of triumphant malice thrummed. He had engineered this moment with meticulous precision, right down to the gold-embossed invitation he had personally sent to Naomi Brooks. He wanted her to witness his ascendancy, to feel the sting of his undeniable success. A stark contrast to the life he imagined she was enduring. He envisioned her arriving, perhaps disheveled, certainly diminished, a living shadow of his past indiscretion. The thought brought a smug curl to his lips. The string quartet played a classical prelude as guests filtered in, a sea of designer gowns and sharp suits, journalists, meticulously vetted and strategically placed, snapped photos, their flashes illuminating the joyous faces of the attendees. Eleanor, oblivious to the deeper machinations at play, occasionally squeezed Charles's hand, her gaze full of adoration. Charles nodded, playing his part perfectly. His eyes, however, subtly scanning the entrance, a predator awaiting its prey. He had been so sure she would come. He had ensured the invitation was delivered personally. A cruel taunt. He knew Naomi, knew her pride, knew that even the deepest humiliation would not deter her if she felt there was an underlying message she needed to convey. He just assumed that message would be one of silent despair. A subtle ripple ran through the arriving guests. Heads turned, whispers began to circulate, and camera flashes intensified. Not directed at the bridal couple, but at a figure making her way slowly, deliberately, down the ornate aisle. Naomi Brooks. She moved with an almost ethereal grace, her dark skin luminous against a flowing crimson gown that clung to her curves, subtly revealing the powerful, resilient physique beneath. Her hair was swept into an elegant, intricate updo, framing a face that held a captivating blend of sorrow, defiance, and an unwavering strength. But it wasn't just Naomi who commanded attention. Flanking her, one on each side and one slightly behind, were three small girls, their dark hair pulled into neat braids, their eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and slight apprehension. They wore matching ivory dresses, tailored to perfection, adorned with delicate lace and small satin bows. Their innocent beauty struck a poignant contrast against the glittering backdrop of the wedding. Charles's carefully constructed composure shattered. His jaw tightened, his eyes widening in disbelief. Then a flicker of raw panic. Eleanor, sensing the sudden shift in his demeanor, followed his qualm, her breath hitched. The guests closest to the aisle gasped audibly. The string quartet faltered, the music dying into a strained silence. Every eye in the cavernous room was fixed on Naomi and the three young girls, who, even from a distance, bore an uncanny resemblance to the groom. Their dark, intelligent eyes, their prominent cheekbones, the slight curve of their lips. They were unmistakably Charles Whitman's offspring. A hush fell over the room, thick with unspoken questions and mounting shock. The initial buzz of the wedding transformed into a suffocating quiet, punctuated only by the rapid clicks of reporters' cameras. Naomi continued her slow, deliberate advance, her gaze fixed on Charles. There was no triumph in her eyes, no overt anger, only a quiet, resolute determination. She hadn't come for revenge, she had come for recognition. Each step echoed the years of silent struggle, the profound loneliness of carrying a burden alone, the weight of a secret unjustly kept. The girls, clutching her hands tightly, looked up at her, then hesitantly at the sea of astonished faces. They were just children, unaware of the profound drama unfolding around them. Yet their very presence was the most damning evidence. The humiliation Charles had planned for Naomi had boomeranged with a force he could never have anticipated. His face, once smug, was now a mask of mortification, tinged with a furious crimson. He was trapped, caught in the public gaze, his meticulously crafted image crumbling around him like a sandcastle in a rising tide. Eleanor, her face a pale canvas of shock, looked from the triplets to Charles, her eyes betraying a dawning horror. The whispers began again, louder this time, coalescing into a buzz of outrage and speculation. The flashbulbs popped relentlessly, capturing every nuanced expression, every betraying gesture. Naomi reached the front row of seats, directly opposite the altar where Charles and Eleanor stood frozen. She gently guided the girls to stand beside her, their small forms unwavering. She did not speak. She did not shout. She did not even glare. Her silence was more powerful than any scream. Her presence a living accusation. The message was clear, etched in the uncanny resemblance of the children. Charles Whitman, the esteemed millionaire, had a secret family, a past he had vehemently denied and abandoned. This wasn't just a personal slight, it was a public unraveling of a carefully constructed lie, a raw expose in the most public of arenas. The racism, implicit in Charles's abandonment of a black woman and their children for a socially acceptable white fiancé, hung heavy in the air, a silent but palpable accusation, the sheer audacity of his invitation, his calculated attempt to belittle her, now served only to amplify his own downfall. The humiliation he had intended for Naomi was now squarely, irrevocably, his own. The grand wedding had become a grand indictment, and the world was watching. The sudden, chilling silence that had descended upon the ballroom was a stark echo of another silence. Years ago, in a sterile doctor's office, Naomi had clutched the sonogram image, her heart soaring with a joy so profound it felt dangerous. Triplets, the doctor had said, a hint of awe in her voice. When Naomi had shared the news with Charles, his initial reaction had been a fleeting, unsettling stillness. His usual charm, which had once captivated her and drawn her into his glittering orbit, seemed to evaporate, replaced by a cold, calculating gaze. Their relationship had begun as a whirlwind. Charles, a burgeoning real estate mogul, had been drawn to Naomi's vivacious spirit and sharp intellect, qualities she displayed as a rising architect. He had showered her with lavish gifts, whispered promises of a shared future, and painted a vibrant picture of their life together. He'd Sector had pursued her relentlessly, showering her with attention and promises of a future together. For Naomi, a young, aspiring architect from a working-class family, Charles represented a dream she hadn't dared to articulate, a partner who valued her, a future where her talents could truly flourish. She had fallen deeply, irrevocably in love. Their romance had been a whirlwind of clandestine dinners, weekend getaways, and whispered intimacies. Charles had seemed genuinely captivated by her, often speaking of their shared future, even hinting at marriage. Naomi, despite her innate cautiousness, had allowed herself to believe in his sincerity, in their connection that seemed to transcend their vastly different backgrounds. The disparity in their social standing, once a fleeting concern, had been assuaged by his repeated assurances of love and commitment. She remembered the day she told him about the pregnancy, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. She had imagined his joy, his embrace, his shared anticipation. The ultrasound had revealed not one, but 3 tiny heartbeats, a miracle that had filled her with a profound, overwhelming sense of purpose. But Charles's reaction had been a brutal, shattering blow. His initial shock quickly morphed into cold fury, then a chilling detachment. The whispered promises evaporated, replaced by harsh demands and calculated accusations. He hadn't been ready for one child, let alone three. He saw them as an impediment to his carefully planned, seemed genuinely enamored, his eyes gleaming with admiration when she spoke of her dreams. She had been blind then, or perhaps, willingly so, to the subtle undercurrents of his ambition, to the way he subtly steered conversations to his own accomplishments, to the faint disdain he sometimes showed for those less fortunate. She had rationalized his infrequent mentions of her racial background, dismissing them as isolated instances of thoughtlessness rather than ingrained prejudice. She had believed in the man she saw, the man who held her hand and spoke of family, but the word triplets had been a trigger, a brutal jolt to his carefully constructed world. His face had contorted, first in disbelief, then in a chilling blend of anger and accusation. "Are you certain?" he had demanded, his voice devoid of warmth. "Are you absolutely certain they are mine?" The question had stung, a poisoned dart, but her shock had been too great to immediately register the depth of the insult. He had become distant, his phone calls less frequent, his excuses for not seeing her more elaborate. Then, one brutal evening, a week after her first trimester ended, he had confronted her in his opulent penthouse. His voice, usually assent, an inconvenient truth that threatened to derail his meticulously crafted future. He had accused her of trapping him, of orchestrating the pregnancy. His voice laced with disdain, echoing the insidious narrative that black women were inherently opportunistic. He offered her money smooth as silk, was harsh, devoid of any past affection. "Naomi, this simply won't work," he had stated, pacing before her, his hands clasped behind his back. "My future is set. I have a substantial sum to take care of it," his words dripping with a chilling callousness. When she recoiled, horrified, his veneer of civility cracked completely. He made it clear, with chilling clarity, that he wanted plans, arrangements. "This complication, it will impede everything." He offered her a check, a sum so obscenely large it felt like a bribe for her very soul. "Take it. Disappear. We never knew each other. These no part of her or the children." He severed all ties, disappearing from her life as abruptly and completely as he had appeared, leaving her adrift in a sea of despair, alone and pregnant with his triplets. The ensuing months were a blur of overwhelming children. "They cannot be linked to me. Not now, not ever." He had accused her of trapping him, of orchestrating the pregnancy, his words a barrage of cutting falsehoods designed to break her. He had vehemently denied paternity, his eyes as despair and relentless struggle. Naomi had faced it all, the debilitating morning sickness, the crushing financial strain, the judgment from some, the pity from others. Her family, though supportive, could only offer so much. Her dreams of architectural grandeur cold and hard as granite. He had called her a gold digger, a manipulator, throwing every vile accusation at her until she felt physically ill. The racial undertone was never explicitly stated, but it hung in the air, thick withered under the weight of her immediate reality. She found herself grappling not just with the physical demands of a high-risk pregnancy, but with the profound emotional wounds inflicted by Charles's abandonment. It wasn't just the personal heartbreak, it was the insidious sting and suffocating the idea that a black woman could not possibly fit into his pristine, upwardly mobile, predominantly white world. Naomi had recoiled, not just from his words, but from the chilling realization that the man she thought of being discarded, of being deemed unworthy, a painful echo of societal prejudices that often cast black women as disposable. She had considered legal action, but the thought of a protracted, public battle with a man of Charles's influence and resources she loved was a monster cloaked in charm. Humiliation had burned through her, but beneath it, a fierce, primal instinct to protect the innocent lives within her had ignited. She had refused the money, her voice trembling but resolute. These had felt insurmountable. She was a single black woman with no substantial financial backing. Facing a powerful white millionaire, the scales of justice, she knew, were often weighted against those like her. She chose endurance, not out of weakness, but out of a ferocious "are your children." Charles, she had stated, her dignity, her only shield. "And I will raise them. You will never have to see them, but I will never deny them their father." He had laughed, a short, their love for her unborn children. She channeled her grief into a resolute determination to provide for them, to shield them from the cruelty of a world that had already shown its harshness. She worked tirelessly, taking on odd jobs, stretching every penny ice of sound that had echoed in the cavernous apartment. Foolish woman, he'd scoffed, before turning his back on her and walking away, leaving her to navigate the sprawling emptiness of his penthouse alone, pregnant and heartbroken. The subsequent, learning to navigate the labyrinthine world of childcare and financial aid, she nurtured her daughters with boundless affection, instilling in them a sense of self-worth and resilience, teaching them to stand tall even when the world tried to diminish them. Every year's had been a crucible. The initial shame and despair had been immense. Raising triplets alone was a monumental task. Every day brought a fresh wave of exhaustion, financial strain, and the relentless demands of three rapidly growing infants. Their scraped knee, every late-night feeding, every tiny laugh reinforced her resolve. She refused to let Charles's abandonment define her or her children. She would build a life for them, a life rich in love and dignity, even if it meant doing were days she survived on sheer willpower. Fueled by the unwavering love for her daughters, she had foregone immediate exposure. Not out of fear, but out of a desperate need to protect her children from the inevitable public scrutiny and the poisonous stain of a paternity so in the shadows of his privilege. The years passed, marked by small triumphs and persistent challenges. Her daughters, Isabella, Sophia, and Olivia, grew into vibrant, intelligent girls, their individual personalities blossoming. They were her world, her purpose, her unwavering battle. She had wanted to create a stable, loving environment for them, free from the drama of their father's cruel rejection. She had quietly filed for child support, which Charles, through his army of lawyers, had fiercely contested and strengthened. Yet, the ghost of Charles's betrayal lingered, a phantom limb of pain and injustice. She had heard snippets of his life, his meteoric rise in the business world, his engagement to Eleanor Vance, a woman who eventually settled for a paltry, humiliating sum, making her sign extensive non-disclosure agreements that kept her tied to silence. She had endured the whispers, the knowing glances, the judgment from those who saw a single black mother of three without understanding the depth of haremize, the kind of social acceptance he clearly craved. With each passing year, the injustice of his abandonment, his complete denial of their shared history, festered within her. It wasn't just about him rejecting her, it was about him struggle or the callous abandonment she had faced. She had worked tirelessly, sometimes juggling 2 jobs, sacrificing her own dreams to ensure her daughters had everything they needed. She had watched them grow, each developing their own distinct personality, yet all bearing the undeniable rejecting his own flesh and blood, about prioritizing social convenience over undeniable human connection. The invitation to his wedding, initially a cruel joke, had struck her differently this time. It wasn't just a personal insult, it was a public declaration of striking resemblance to Charles Whitman, their laughter, their curious questions about their absent father, their innocent belief that he would one day appear, had been both a source of strength and a constant, aching reminder of his betrayal, the invitation to his perceived triumph, a final, definitive erasure of her and her children from his narrative. But something had shifted within Naomi. She was no longer the vulnerable, heartbroken woman he had abandoned. She was a mother, strong and resolute. With his wedding had arrived like a carefully crafted grenade. At first, a bitter laugh had escaped her lips. The audacity, the sheer, unadulterated cruelty of it. But then as she looked at her 3 beautiful, intelligent, 3 living, breathing testimonies to his deception. She had endured silently for years, absorbing the blows, protecting her daughters. But the sight of that gleaming invitation, so brazenly sent, had ignited a spark of righteous indignation. She realized that her silence, vibrant daughters, a new resolve had solidified within her. No longer would she allow Charles Whitman to erase their existence, to deny their lineage, to claim a life of untarnished prestige built on a foundation of lies and abandonment. He wanted, while protective, had also perpetuated his lie, allowed him to rewrite history. She owed it to her daughters and to herself, to stand in the light, to expose the truth, not for revenge, but for recognition. She would not allow to humiliate her. She would show him true humiliation. She would show him the undeniable truth of his forgotten past. Not in a courtroom, not through a lawyer, but on the most public stage imaginable, before the very people whose admiration he so craved him to erase their existence. She would not allow him to define her story. She would reclaim her narrative, and in doing so, expose the insidious undercurrents of prejudice and privilege that allowed men like Charles to walk away unburdened. The decision to attend to it, the silence, the endurance, had served their purpose. It had given her time to build her daughter's world, to fortify her own spirit. Now, the time for silence was over. It was time for the truth to shatter. To bring her daughters was not born of malice, but of a profound, unyielding demand for accountability. It was a courageous act of resistance, a silent declaration that their lives mattered, that their truth deserved to be seen. Life settled into a grueling rhythm for Naomi. The glittering spectacle of Charles Whitman's wedding faded into a bitter memory, replaced by the relentless demands of raising three vibrant, inquisitive girls. Isabella, Sophia, and Olivia were her universe, a constant source of joy and exhaustion. Her days began before dawn, orchestrating a symphony of breakfast, school preparations, and the intricate logistics of childcare. Evenings were a blur of homework, dinner, and bedtime stories, often ending with Naomi collapsing into bed, her body aching, her mind racing with calculations of how to make ends meet. She had forgone her architectural aspirations, the demanding nature of the profession incompatible with the constant needs of her triplets. Instead, she took on a series of precarious, often low-paying jobs that offered flexibility, but little financial security. Her first encounter with the insidious tendrils of systemic bias came when searching for suitable housing. With three young children, all under school age at the time, she was often met with polite but firm rejections from landlords. Apartments she inquired about mysteriously became unavailable when she mentioned the number of occupants. In one instance, a landlord, a middle-aged white woman, had peered at Naomi and her three eager toddlers with a thinly veiled expression of skepticism. "Are you sure you can manage such a large family in a two-bedroom?" she had asked, her gaze lingering on Naomi's skin, a question hanging unspoken in the air. "It's just a lot of responsibility for one person." Naomi knew it wasn't about the space, it was about the unspoken assumptions, the stereotypes of a single black mother struggling, of potential trouble. She eventually found a small, older apartment in a less affluent neighborhood, a stark contrast to the upscale areas she had once envisioned for her children. Employment proved to be another battlefield. Despite her impressive academic background and initial career trajectory in architecture, the gaps in her resume, necessitated by the demands of early motherhood, were glaring. Interviewers, predominantly white and male, would politely skirt the issue, but their questions often circled back to her availability and commitment in a way that felt loaded. "It's a demanding role, Ms. Brooks," one hiring manager for a small firm had stated, his eyes flicking to her hands, perhaps searching for a wedding band that wasn't there. "We require someone fully dedicated." The implication was clear: a single mother, particularly a black one, could not possess the same level of professional dedication as others. She resorted to working as a freelance designer for small, obscure projects, her talent undervalued, her income perpetually uncertain. She cleaned houses, worked retail shifts, anything to ensure there was food on the table and clothes on her daughters' backs. As the girls entered elementary school, Naomi faced new challenges, despite their bright intellects and curious minds. Isabella, Sophia, and Olivia sometimes faced subtle biases. Teachers, well-meaning but perhaps unconsciously influenced, occasionally underestimated their abilities or misinterpreted their spiritedness as disruptive. When Isabella, the most vocal of the three, spoke up against a perceived injustice in the classroom, her teacher often dismissed it as being too sensitive. While similar assertiveness from their white classmates was praised as leadership potential, Naomi had to advocate constantly, attending parent-teacher conferences armed with notes, advocating for her daughter's curriculum needs, and ensuring they received the same attention and opportunities as their peers. She meticulously documented their achievements, creating a fortress of evidence against any unconscious bias. Financial struggles were a constant shadow. The meager child support Charles paid, a humiliating pittance compared to his vast wealth, barely covered a fraction of the triplets' expenses. The non-disclosure agreement he had forced her to sign loomed over her, a constant threat that prevented her from seeking more substantial legal recourse without risking legal repercussions and public exposure she wasn't yet ready for. Every unexpected expense, a broken appliance, a sudden illness, sent her into a spiral of anxiety. She became adept at stretching every dollar, finding creative ways to provide for her girls without them feeling deprived. Her apartment, though small, was always filled with warmth, laughter, and the scent of homemade meals. She refused to let financial hardship define their childhood. Socially, Naomi felt isolated. Her old friends, many of whom were climbing corporate ladders or starting families with partners, gradually drifted away. Their lives diverged. They couldn't fully comprehend the sheer magnitude of her daily grind, the constant tightrope walk between survival and dignity. New acquaintances sometimes offered unsolicited advice or pitying glances, born from assumptions about her life as a single black mother. "You're so strong," they'd say, a phrase that, while meant kindly, often felt like a backhanded compliment, implying that her strength was only necessary because of her perceived unfortunate circumstances. She learned to guard her heart, to conserve her energy for her daughters, who were her true support system. Despite these pervasive, subtle forms of discrimination, Naomi refused to be broken. Each covert slight, each systemic hurdle, only fortified her resolve. She saw the resilience in her daughters' eyes, the way they embraced every challenge, their unwavering belief in her. They were a constant reminder of why she fought. She educated herself on legal rights, on community resources, becoming an expert navigator of systems that often sought to marginalize her. She instilled in her girls not just resilience, but a deep sense of pride in their heritage, in their strength, in their unique family. She knew that her struggle was not just her own. It was a reflection of broader societal injustices that often force Black women to carry disproportionate burdens. The memory of Charles's disdain, his denial of his own children, simmered beneath the surface, a slow burn that refused to extinguish. She had endured, not just for herself, but for them, for the future they deserved. Her quiet resistance, her daily struggle to provide and protect, was a testament to her unyielding spirit, a prelude to the more public stand she would eventually take. The daily grind for Naomi was a test of endurance, a relentless cycle of work, care, and financial juggling. Isabella, Sophia, and Olivia were growing fast, their needs expanding with every passing month. Their innocent questions about their father became more frequent, more insistent, piercing through Naomi's carefully constructed silence. "Mommy, why doesn't Papa visit us like Sarah's dad visits her?" Sophia had asked one evening, her brow furrowed with confusion. Naomi's heart had constricted, the weight of the non-disclosure agreement pressing down on her like a physical burden. She would offer vague, comforting answers, deflecting their curiosity. But each question chipped away at her resolve to remain silent. The precariousness of her situation came to a head during a particularly harsh winter. Olivia, the youngest, developed a severe respiratory infection that required specialized medication and multiple trips to an out-of-network clinic. The bills mounted swiftly, far exceeding what her meager income and the paltry child support could cover. Naomi exhausted her small savings, borrowed from her already struggling family, and even considered predatory payday loans, a desperate measure she had always sworn to avoid. The shame of her financial desperation gnawed at her, compounded by the bitter irony that the father of her ailing child, a man of immense wealth, lived a life of unchecked luxury. One frigid afternoon, after yet another exhausting shift cleaning offices, Naomi found herself at a community center, seeking information about assistance programs. She sat slumped in a worn plastic chair, staring blankly at a bulletin board overflowing with notices. Her spirit depleted, a woman with kind, intelligent eyes and a cascade of silver hair approached her. This was Mrs. Anya Sharma, a retired legal aid attorney who now volunteered her time offering informal guidance to those navigating complex bureaucratic systems. Mrs. Sharma had observed Naomi for a while, sensing her quiet despair. "Are you finding what you need?" dear Mrs. Sharma asked, her voice soft but resonant. Naomi sighed, a heavy, weary sound. "Honestly, I don't even know what I need anymore. Just a way to keep my daughters healthy without losing everything." She gestured vaguely at the stacks of bills in her worn handbag. "Their father, he's a millionaire, but he pays next to nothing, and I'm bound by an agreement." Mrs. Sharma's expression remained gentle, but a keen intelligence flickered in her eyes. "An agreement? You say about paternity," Naomi hesitated, the strictures of the NDA suddenly looming large. "It's complicated. He wanted me to sign something, to keep quiet, and I did, for the girl's sake, to avoid a fight." Mrs. Sharma nodded slowly. Non-disclosure agreements are powerful tools, often used to silence the vulnerable, but they are not always absolute, especially when they concern the well-being of minor children. There are nuances, exceptions. Laws are designed to protect children above all else, regardless of what private agreements adults might make. She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Did you have independent counsel review this agreement before you signed it?" Naomi shook her head, a fresh wave of regret washing over her. "No, he had his lawyers. They just put it in front of me. I was desperate, terrified, and very pregnant. I just wanted him gone." Mrs. Sharma's gaze sharpened, a spark of indignation in her eyes. "That's often how it works. Coercion by circumstance. But a contract signed under duress, especially one that impacts a child's fundamental right to support from both parents, can be challenged. Not easily, mind you, and not without risk, but it's not impossible." She pulled a small notepad and pen from her pocket. "Tell me, what was the exact wording concerning silence and paternity, and what are the terms of the financial support?" Naomi recounted the terms, her voice gaining a surprising steadiness as she articulated the precise details of her entrapment. Mrs. Sharma listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. When Naomi finished, Mrs. Sharma looked up, her expression grave but resolute. "You signed away your right to speak about the relationship." "Yes, but the core right of a child to financial support from both parents, commensurate with their needs and the parent's means, is typically upheld by family courts, even if he denies paternity. The undeniable fact of the children's existence and their strong resemblance to him, especially in a public setting, shifts the burden of proof. Your NDA might prevent you from talking to the press about your relationship with him, but it would be very difficult for it to stop a court from ordering a paternity test or from demanding fair child support, and it certainly doesn't prevent you from seeking justice for your children's rights." A tiny flicker of hope, almost imperceptible at first, ignited within Naomi. She had lived for years under the suffocating blanket of Charles's legal threats, believing she had no recourse. Mrs. Sharma's calm, authoritative words were a lifeline, a chink in the formidable armor Charles had constructed around himself. "So, I'm not entirely trapped," Naomi asked, her voice barely a whisper. not where your children's welfare is concerned. Mrs. Sharma affirmed, her hand resting gently on Naomi's arm. The law has a deeper purpose than merely protecting the wealthy. It is designed, in principle, to protect the vulnerable. Your first act of resistance, Naomi, is to understand your rights, to reclaim your voice, even if it is initially through the voice of legal counsel. And your next act, if you choose, is to force the truth into the open, not just for your own vindication, but for your daughter's future. She gave Naomi the name of a pro bono family law clinic and advised her on the crucial evidence she would need to gather. As Naomi left the community center, the cold winter air no longer felt quite so biting. The burden of debt and worry was still immense, but it was now accompanied by a nascent sense of empowerment. Mrs. Sharma's words had not solved all her problems, but they had given her something infinitely more valuable: knowledge and a path forward. She understood now that her silence, while protective in the immediate aftermath of Charles's abandonment, had also allowed him to continue his charade of an untarnished life. She looked down at her hands, no longer seeing them as instruments of survival, but as hands capable of fighting, of demanding the justice her daughters deserved. This quiet conversation, this simple act of shared wisdom from a compassionate stranger, had been her first step towards a reckoning. The fight was far from over. But for the first time in years, Naomi felt a surge of defiant strength, a readiness to challenge the powerful forces that had sought to keep her in the shadows. The covert discrimination she had faced had hardened her, but this newfound understanding of her legal standing, this quiet counsel, had given her the tactical insight to finally push back. The Grand Hyatt Ballroom, once a tableau of refined elegance, had devolved into a tableau of raw, exposed truth. The hushed whispers had swelled into a cacophony of gasps, exclamations, and the incessant, almost predatory click of camera shutters. Charles Whitman, standing rigid at the altar, his face a grotesque mask of fury and dread, stared at Naomi and the three small girls beside her. His carefully constructed world, built on denials and deceptions, was crumbling before his very eyes. Eleanor Vance, his fiancée, her face ashen, turned from the triplets to Charles, her once adoring gaze now filled with a dawning horror and a flicker of deep betrayal. Naomi stood firm, her spine straight, her gaze unwavering as she met Charles's eyes. She said nothing, but her presence, and that of Isabella, Sophia, and Olivia, spoke volumes. The triplets, initially bewildered by the sudden silence in the sea of staring faces, now looked up at their mother, then curiously at the man who was undeniably their father. Their innocence was a stark, poignant contrast to the venomous shock radiating from Charles. The resemblance was undeniable, a living, breathing testament to his paternity. Isabella, with Charles's strong jawline, Sophia, with his keen, intelligent eyes, and Olivia, with the precise curve of his lips, they were reflections of him, undeniable and unalterable. Charles who? Who are these children? Eleanor's voice, though a strained whisper, carried in the electrified silence, cutting through the stunned murmurs. Her eyes, wild and disbelieving, darted between the triplets and Charles, searching for an explanation that wouldn't shatter her world. Charles finally found his voice, though it was a strained rasp, devoid of his usual polished cadence. Eleanor, darling, I don't know. This is some ridiculous stunt. He attempted a dismissive wave of his hand, a feeble attempt to regain control, but his trembling fingers betrayed his profound agitation. This woman is clearly deranged, a gold digger, trying to extort us. The accusation, meant to discredit Naomi, only fueled the fury of the assembled press. Reporters, sensing a monumental scoop, surged forward, their microphones thrust out, cameras flashing like a blizzard. "Mr. Whitman, are these your children?" a male voice boomed from the crowd. "Miss Brooks, can you confirm paternity?" Another shouted, the questions overlapping, intensifying the chaos. Naomi finally spoke, her voice clear and resonant. cutting through the din. Charles Whitman knows exactly who these children are. They are Isabella, Sophia, and Olivia Brooks, and they are his daughters. Her words, simple and direct, reverberated through the grand hall, each syllable a hammer blow against Charles's carefully constructed facade. She had not come for revenge. She had come for truth. The undeniable physical evidence standing beside her was her unimpeachable witness. Eleanor let out a small, choked sound, her hand flying to her mouth. She stumbled back, her gaze fixed on the triplets, then on Charles. The perfect picture of a fairy tale wedding dissolved into a grotesque portrait of betrayal. Her parents, standing near the altar, looked on in stunned disbelief. Their faces a mixture of confusion and growing anger. Charles's face flushed a deep crimson, his attempt at denial collapsing under the weight of Naomi's calm, resolute statement and the irrefutable evidence beside her. "This is a lie. A desperate, pathetic lie," he bellowed, his voice losing its composure, betraying his panic. He lunged forward, not at Naomi, but at the nearest reporter, attempting to bat away a microphone. A desperate, futile effort to stop the cameras from capturing his unraveling. His refined veneer had cracked, revealing the raw, ugly fear beneath. The security guards, previously instructed to maintain a dignified distance, now stepped in. Not to remove Naomi, but to contain the increasingly agitated Charles. The guests, initially shocked into silence, now buzzed with fervent discussion. Whispers of abandonment, secret family, and disgrace circulated, amplified by the sheer audacity of the spectacle. Many recognized Naomi from the previous night's news cycle, where snippets of Charles's background, including his past relationship with a mysterious woman, had begun to surface. Carefully planted seeds by Naomi's legal counsel based on Mrs. Sharma's advice. A prominent society columnist, known for her sharp tongue and even sharper pen, stepped forward, her eyes glinting with professional satisfaction. "Mr. Whitman," she stated, her voice dripping with acid, "it appears your past has come to collect its due. These girls bear an uncanny resemblance to you. Are you truly denying them?" Charles glared at her, his chest heaving, trapped like a rat in a spotlight. He could not deny what was staring everyone in the face. The irrefutable visual evidence. His previous attempts at charming or intimidating his way out of situations were useless here. This was not a boardroom negotiation. It was a public execution of his reputation. He stammered, searching for words, but none came. Eleanor, her face a mask of profound disappointment, finally spoke again, her voice low and broken. "Charles, you told me there was nothing, that she was just an old acquaintance." Her eyes, swimming with tears, found Naomi's. There was no malice in her gaze, only a deep, heartbreaking empathy. It was clear she was as much a victim of Charles's deception as Naomi had been. The public impact was immediate and devastating for Charles, the carefully curated image of the successful, benevolent millionaire, a pillar of society, shattered into 1,000 pieces. The racial undertones of his abandonment, a wealthy white man discarding a black woman and their children to maintain his social standing, became glaringly obvious to everyone present. The stark contrast between his opulent display of wealth and the impoverished struggle Naomi had endured to raise his children was a damning indictment. News anchors, alerted by their field reporters, began breaking into live broadcasts. Their voices imbued with incredulity, social media exploded with photos and videos, the narrative of his betrayal spreading like wildfire. Naomi, having made her statement, remained poised. She had not come to scream or accuse, but to present the undeniable truth. Her act of defiance was not merely personal. It was a public unraveling of systemic privilege, a silent protest against the casual cruelty often inflicted upon those deemed lesser. The power dynamic, for this moment, had shifted. Charles, the orchestrator of humiliation, was now the one humiliated, trapped in a spotlight of his own making. his carefully constructed lies exposed for the world to see. The grand wedding had become a grand revelation, a courtroom where the verdict was delivered by public opinion and irrefutable. Innocent faces. The immediate aftermath of Naomi's revelation plunged the Grand Hyatt ballroom into an unprecedented state of pandemonium. Charles Whitman, his face contorted in a mask of apoplectic rage and sheer terror, was physically restrained by two burly security guards who had anticipated his volatile reaction, his desperate lunges at the reporters, his wild gesticulations, only served to amplify the spectacle. Each frantic movement a testament to his unraveling control, the sheer indignity of being publicly exposed and manhandled in front of New York's elite, on what was supposed to be the most triumphant day of his life, pushed him to the brink of a complete breakdown. He was yelling, but his words were garbled, swallowed by the rising tide of camera flashes and the relentless questioning from the press. Eleanor Vance, her wedding gown a stark white against her bloodless face, stood frozen for a moment, her eyes fixed on the three identical girls. Then, with a quiet sob, she ripped off her veil, letting it fall to the opulent carpet like a shroud. She turned her back on Charles, ignoring his frantic pleas, and walked swiftly, albeit unsteadily, towards her parents. Her mother rushed to embrace her, shielding her from the invasive lenses, while her father, his jaw clenched, fixed Charles with a look of withering contempt, the visual dismissal of Charles by his fiancée, a clear abandonment at the altar, was captured by every single camera, a symbol of his immediate and devastating personal fallout. Naomi, meanwhile, remained composed, a serene anchor in the storm. She gently squeezed the hands of Isabella, Sophia, and Olivia, who, sensing the tension, huddled closer to her. Their innocent faces, a stark contrast to the venomous fury emanating from Charles, only intensified the public's perception of his callous abandonment. Mrs. Anya Sharma, who had discreetly positioned herself near the back of the ballroom, now emerged, moving with purpose towards Naomi. She subtly guided Naomi and the girls through a side exit, away from the direct scrum, while simultaneously directing a younger associate from the pro bono law clinic to engage with the press. "Ladies and gentlemen," the associate announced, her voice firm and clear, though still battling the din, "Miss Brooks has endured years of hardship and abandonment. These are indeed Mr. Charles Whitman's daughters. Legal proceedings will commence immediately to ensure these children receive the support and recognition they are due. We ask for privacy as Miss Brooks focuses on her children's well-being." The statement, while brief, officially confirmed the allegations, adding legal weight to the unfolding drama. Within hours, the story exploded across every major news outlet. The dramatic images of Charles's enraged face, Eleanor's tearful exit, and the uncanny resemblance of the triplets dominated headlines. Cable news channels ran continuous loops of the wedding footage, dissecting every moment. Social media became a maelstrom of outrage. Hashtags like #Whitman triplets and #MillionaireDad instantly trended, drawing millions of comments. The public reaction was overwhelmingly sympathetic towards Naomi and her daughters, and vehemently condemning of Charles. The racial element, though often implicitly understood rather than explicitly stated in mainstream media, was a powerful undercurrent. Commentators highlighted the blatant privilege of a wealthy white man who could simply walk away from his responsibilities, while a black woman was left to shoulder the burden alone. Working tirelessly in the shadows, corporate repercussions were swift and brutal. Charles Whitman, a prominent figure on several corporate boards and the face of Whitman Enterprises, found himself in immediate crisis. Board members convened emergency meetings within 24 hours. He was stripped of his chairmanship of two major philanthropic foundations. His company's stock took an immediate hit, dropping several percentage points as investors reacted to the scandal. The ethical implications of a man who built his empire on an image of integrity, abandoning his own children, especially with such visible racial implications, were simply too damaging. Investors, conscious of public perception, began to distance themselves. Eleanor Vance, after a deeply emotional conversation with her family, issued a public statement through her family's lawyer. She announced the immediate annulment of her engagement to Charles Whitman, stating she was shocked and heartbroken by the deceptive and morally reprehensible actions of Mr. Whitman and expressed her deepest sympathy and support for Ms. Brooks and her daughters. Who are the true victims in this tragic affair? This further isolated Charles, removing any hope of salvaging his social standing through a prestigious marriage. Meanwhile, Naomi and her legal team, bolstered by Mrs. Sharma's strategic guidance, moved swiftly. The day after the wedding, a formal paternity suit was filed in family court, along with a petition for significant child support and a challenge to the validity of the original non-disclosure agreement. The media presence outside the courthouse was immense, turning the preliminary filing into a public spectacle. Charles, through his high-powered legal team, immediately launched a counteroffensive, attempting to portray Naomi as a calculating opportunist seeking to exploit his fame and fortune. His lawyers argued that the timing of her appearance at the wedding was evidence of a deliberate, malicious intent to disrupt his life. They reiterated their demand for a DNA test, publicly suggesting the possibility of a different father, a desperate attempt to sow doubt that only further inflamed public opinion. However, the tide of public sentiment was heavily against Charles. Social media accounts dedicated to supporting Naomi sprang up, amplifying her story and raising awareness about the plight of single mothers, especially the women of color, facing similar injustices. High-profile figures, including celebrities and activists, began to voice their support for Naomi, condemning Charles's actions as a symptom of a larger societal problem where wealthy men often escaped accountability. Donations poured into the pro bono clinic that was representing Naomi, allowing them to allocate more resources to her case. The preliminary court hearing was scheduled within days. The judge, recognizing the high-profile nature of the case and the clear evidence of the children's resemblance, wasted no time. A court-ordered DNA test was mandated. With an expedited timeline, Charles's lawyers attempted to delay, citing various procedural technicalities. But the judge, clearly uninterested in protracted drama, firmly shut down their objections. The weight of public scrutiny, fueled by the relentless media coverage, was a powerful, unspoken force in the courtroom. Charles, appearing via video conference from his lawyer's office, looked visibly strained, a stark contrast to his usual arrogant demeanor. His reputation, once a fortress, was now exposed and vulnerable. The immediate consequences of his choices were not merely financial or social, they were a profound unraveling of his very identity, witnessed by millions. The court-ordered DNA test results arrived with stark, irrefutable clarity, shattering Charles Whitman's last vestiges of denial. The report, made public within days of the preliminary hearing, confirmed what the world already knew. Isabella, Sophia, and Olivia were indeed his biological daughters, with a 99.99% probability. The scientific proof was a final, undeniable nail in the coffin of his public image, extinguishing any faint hope he might have clung to of discrediting Naomi. His legal team, left with no credible defense against paternity, could only shift their strategy to minimizing the financial fallout, a desperate rearguard action for Naomi. The DNA confirmation was not a moment of jubilant victory, but one of profound validation. It was the scientific affirmation of a truth she had carried in her heart for years, a truth that had been denied and scorned. The public impact was immediate and widespread. News anchors, who had previously maintained a veneer of impartiality, now spoke with overt condemnation of Charles Whitman. Pundits debated the systemic issues illuminated by the case: the privilege of wealth, the gendered burden of childcare, and the racial biases that often allowed powerful white men to escape accountability for their actions towards black women and their families. Naomi, guided by Mrs. Sharma and the pro bono legal clinic, began to take control of her narrative. She agreed to her first televised interview, choosing a respected national news anchor known for her empathetic yet incisive approach. Dressed simply but elegantly, Naomi spoke with a quiet dignity that belied the immense pressure she was under. She didn't lash out at Charles. Instead, she focused on the experiences of single mothers, the challenges of navigating a system that often seems stacked against them, and the fundamental right of children to be acknowledged and supported by both parents. "This isn't just about me or Charles Whitman," Naomi stated calmly, her voice resonating with millions. "This is about every mother who has ever been abandoned, every child who has been denied their rightful place. It's about accountability, and it's about challenging the idea that wealth and power can erase responsibility. My daughters deserve to know their truth, and they deserve a life where their worth is never questioned because of someone else's shame." Her social media presence, once minimal, became a platform for awareness. With the help of the legal team's communications specialists, Naomi began sharing carefully curated updates about her journey, not dwelling on victimhood, but focusing on resilience and advocacy. She posted photos of her daughters thriving, snippets of their daily lives, reminding the public that beyond the sensational headlines were three real children whose lives had been irrevocably impacted. She used her growing voice to highlight stories of other single mothers, creating a powerful community of shared experiences and mutual support. Naomi's story became a rallying cry for various social justice movements. Women's rights organizations highlighted the case as an example of patriarchal neglect. Racial justice advocates pointed to the implicit biases that allowed Charles to walk away from his Black family with impunity for so long. She was invited to speak at virtual conferences and online forums, where she shared her insights on systemic barriers and the importance of legal literacy. She consistently emphasized that her fight was not about individual revenge, but about pushing for broader systemic change, ensuring that legal frameworks adequately protected vulnerable families, and that individuals, regardless of their wealth or influence, were held accountable for their actions. The Pro Bono Law Clinic, now overflowing with new cases and donations inspired by Naomi's bravery, established a dedicated fund in her daughters' names, the Isabella, Sophia, and Olivia Fund for Child Support Justice. And the fund aimed to provide legal aid to single parents, particularly women of color, battling similar paternity and child support disputes against powerful individuals. This tangible impact of her story demonstrated the power of public awareness to effect real change. The Whitman family, Charles's parents and siblings, maintained a stony silence, their public reputation tarnished by association. His former business partners began to distance themselves. Citing irreconcilable differences in corporate values, Charles's once unassailable financial empire began to show cracks. As public perception bled into investor confidence, major contracts were pulled, philanthropic ties severed, and his personal wealth, though still vast, faced significant legal challenges from the pending child support case. Naomi, however, refused to be consumed by the negativity or by the desire for retribution. Her focus remained steadfastly on her daughters. She began exploring new opportunities for herself. Now that her story had given her a platform, she started a blog, detailing her journey and offering practical advice to others. She even received publishing offers, recognizing the profound impact her story could have in a longer format. The public's outpouring of support, the messages of solidarity, and the tangible assistance she received allowed her to start rebuilding her life on her own terms, not just as a survivor, but as a powerful advocate for change. She was no longer just Naomi Brooks. She was a symbol of resilience, a voice for the voiceless, transforming her personal struggle into a force for collective empowerment. Her journey from silent endurance to public advocacy was a testament to the transformative power of truth and the enduring strength of a mother's love. The final court ruling on the matter of Charles Whitman's paternity and child support was, for Naomi, a profound declaration of justice. The judge, in a meticulously reasoned and widely publicized decision, ruled unequivocally in favor of Naomi Brooks. The non-disclosure agreement, forced upon Naomi under duress and clearly detrimental to the rights and welfare of minor children, was officially deemed unenforceable. striking down the chains of silence that had bound her for years. The court ordered Charles Whitman to pay a substantial sum in retroactive child support, dating back to the birth of his daughters, and mandated ongoing monthly payments that reflected his immense wealth and the lifestyle his children would have enjoyed had he acknowledged them from the outset. The ruling specifically included provisions for the girls' private schooling, extracurricular activities, healthcare, and future educational expenses. Ensuring their needs were met with dignity and security, the judgment sent shockwaves through the elite circles Charles once inhabited, serving as a powerful legal precedent for challenging NDAs that exploit power imbalances in family matters. It was a clear statement that wealth could not perpetually shield individuals from their responsibilities, especially when children's fundamental rights were at stake. For Charles, the consequences were devastating and far-reaching. His carefully cultivated public image was irreparable. He was removed from all corporate boards. His philanthropic endeavors crumbled, and Whitman Enterprises faced a barrage of investigations into its ethical practices, many fueled by the public's outrage. His social standing evaporated, and he retreated from the public eye, a disgraced figure whose name became synonymous with callous disregard. The community, already awakened by Naomi's courageous stand, rallied further in her support. She was no longer just a wronged mother. She was a symbol of resilience and a catalyst for change. Local and national organizations recognized her unwavering strength. She was invited to speak at prominent women's rights conferences, racial justice summits, and family advocacy forums, where her story became a powerful narrative of resistance. She spoke not with anger, but with an inspiring clarity about the systemic issues that often allowed powerful individuals to perpetuate harm without accountability. Her articulate voice and dignified demeanor resonated deeply, making her a compelling advocate. The Isabella Sophia and Olivia Fund for Child Support Justice, established by the pro bono clinic that represented her, flourished, receiving substantial donations from individuals and organizations inspired by her case. The fund actively supported other single parents, particularly women of color, navigating similar legal battles, providing them with crucial resources and legal representation they otherwise couldn't afford. Naomi became an honorary board member, dedicating her time and energy to ensuring others had the support she once desperately needed. Her architectural background, though initially sidelined, found a new, meaningful outlet. She began consulting on affordable housing projects for single-parent families, applying her design skills to create safe, supportive environments for vulnerable communities. Years passed, and Naomi's life, once shrouded in struggle, blossomed with purpose and joy. Isabella, Sophia, and Olivia thrived, growing into confident, intelligent young women, deeply proud of their mother's courage and their unique family story. They knew their father not as the loving presence they once yearned for, but as a distant, complicated figure whose actions had, ironically, paved the way for their mother's powerful advocacy. Naomi ensured they understood the larger context of their story, not as a tale of personal vendetta, but as a pivotal moment that exposed injustice and contributed to a broader movement for accountability and equality. Naomi eventually published a memoir, The Unveiling, which became a national bestseller. The book detailed her journey from abandonment and silent endurance to her courageous stand at the wedding, the legal battles, and her ongoing advocacy work. It was not a story of bitterness, but one of triumph, resilience, and the enduring power of a mother's love. She dedicated the book to every child who deserves to be seen and every parent who fights to make it so, in an emotionally charged ceremony. A coalition of civil rights and women's advocacy groups presented Naomi with a Lifetime Achievement Award for her contributions to social justice. The event, attended by countless supporters, legal professionals, and families she had helped, was a testament to the profound ripple effect of her bravery. Standing on stage, Naomi looked out at the sea of faces, her daughters beaming in the front row. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the diverse crowd, a clear message etched in her eyes. "My story began with pain, but it ends with purpose," Naomi declared, her voice clear and strong. "It's a testament to the fact that truth, no matter how inconvenient, always finds its way to light. It's a reminder that justice is not just a concept, but a fight, a fight that requires courage, community, and an unwavering belief in the inherent worth of every human being, especially our children. Let this be a message that no one, no matter how powerful or privileged, can escape accountability for their actions. And let it be an inspiration for all of us to stand up, to speak out, and to work tirelessly towards a world where every child is recognized, every family is supported, and true equity prevails. The ballroom erupted in a standing ovation, a resounding affirmation of her message and the indelible legacy she had forged. Her journey was a beacon of hope, proving that even from the depths of public humiliation, a powerful, inspiring revolution of truth could emerge.